went over to the little old town of Eakley where, and lo and behold, there was a good-looking lady sitting there on a rock on the side of the street. Eakley those days didn't have any paved streets or sidewalks. But she was barefooted, and I to tell her she was flipping pebbles with her big toe.
In Muskogee
And
and
a
a cafe.
Yeah, yeah,
How old were you?
well, golly.
If she'll tell me, I'll tell mine.
I don't know.
Cause I'm 3 years older. Anyway, we've been married
We've been married 65 years.
65 years ago.
Well, I was a city girl. I was in the Wagoner City Schools, and he went to Star School,
Country school.
Star Country School. So, just whenever I met one of their friends, Glenda Dockery, now it's Glenda Drake. She and I became friends, and they went to school out there together. Well, I would go home with her on the weekends sometimes, stay all night, and whenever I did, the Dockerys and the Coopers were great friends. So there was Cotton Cooper there that was when I first landed my eyes on him. And
I'll start off, it's 1950, and I'm a carpenter in St. Louis, Missouri. And America at that time was engaged in a conflict with North Korea. And I got the word that the draft board soon was going to send me a greeting that I would be drafted in the U.S. Army. Well, since I was a pilot and loved to fly, I decided to join the Air Force instead. So, in December of 1950, I enlisted in the Air Force, went through basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and then I found myself in Aircraft and Engine Mechanic School in Shepherd Field, Texas. And after that, they sent me to Chanute, Illinois, to Jet Engine Specialist School. And when I came out of that, I got my orders to go to Travis Air Force Base in California. So that was my assignment. And when I got there, the first thing that I'd do when I go to a new base was to find a nearest church, Baptist church in town. So the nearest town was Fairfield, California, and that was about 10 miles away. So I found a church there, a Baptist church, First Baptist Church of Fairfield, and became a member. And that's where I met a pretty young lady by the name of Mary Herman.
Okay, we went to the same school, but we weren't in high school at the same time. I married a young bride, and she was a grade school student when I was in high school. I knew who she was. She was that cute little Llewellyn girl, and that's the extent of it. My sophomore year,
Sophomore of college.
of college, when school was let out, my at that point in time lifelong friend and girlfriend went skating, which was the only activity in Nash, Oklahoma at that time, and
kids,
when they had couple skates, I asked Fern to skate, and we skated, and that was really the first time that I'd ever talked to her or paid any attention to her. She always
I
said
think he just did it to make his girlfriend mad.
First
Really?
time I remember Terry was in the 6th grade. He'd always gone to country school, and he came to the town school to over here to Central when he was in the 6th grade, and I just barely remember him. And then when I was freshman in high school, at that time, for the FFA coronation, all the young men that were in FFA got to choose a young lady to walk with them in the coronation. And so I walked with Terry when I was a freshman in high school. Then I had
Well, first, like I say, in the 6th grade, I remember her, and it was about, oh, I don't know, a sophomore in high school. We were both hauling wheat for our fathers, and she down at the elevator, and she had on some shorts that made her features outstanding.
Well, I was in the Air Force in 1958. They closed the base at Bryan Air Force Base in Texas, and I transferred to Luke Air Force Base in Glendale, Arizona. And I'll let you go from there.
Well, actually, I'm a Texas girl, and but I went to live with my sister in Phoenix, Arizona. Her husband was in the Air Force, and I was looking for a job, and I got a job on the Air Force Base. Boy, that's where you really want to work. But anyway, I worked where they took in clothes, the cleaners did, and then sent them into town having that done. So I was able to work the counter and get acquainted with everybody. And when he walked up to the counter, I thought, he acted a little bashful, if you can believe that or not. But anyway, there was a rodeo coming up, and he asked me out to go to the rodeo, and after we went to the rodeo, we didn't date anyone else or see anyone else. He was the one for me. I knew that.
Me.
We were in school together, graduated right here at Wagoner High School, and I spent my entire career in Wagoner High School, and Betty moved here from Hulbert when she was in the 4th grade. Just knew her, didn't, just in the same class. And then later on, a few years later, like 8, our senior year in high school is when we actually started dating, you might say. And our actual first date was on a Friday night at the Stigler-Wagner football game. I crowned her football queen.
You want to tell it? Go ahead.
Well, he had just got back from the service, and back then, you know, farmers helped each other when they were hay baling, thrashing, all that. So his dad, my dad, had done a little work for him, and so he wanted to repay Pop Hagel for what. And so he told his dad, said, I'll just go over and do the chores that he needed to have
You know,
done.
I hadn't been home very long, and then about a week or so or something.
Like that.
And they
So
discharged
I didn't
me,
know him at
you
the
know.
time.
But anyway,
So Pop Hagel came in and he said, I was having a weenie roast that night. A few friends, you know, kiddos coming out to the farm. And so he said, Johnny Patrick's son is out there helping me. He said, would you like to go out and ask him to your weenie roast? I thought, well, I was pretty young. Sure.
We met while we were students at the Golden Gate Seminary. At that time was in Berkeley, California. We had a mutual friend named George Maeda who introduced us. We have a different story about where that occurred, but I trust Alice's memory more than mine on that.
He was a
Janitor.
janitor. No fancy name, just a janitor. And he was coming down the steps to go into the library. And George and I had gone in to visit with George, who was also a janitor. And he was coming, we came out of the room as Wade was coming down the steps. And George introduced us. Now Wade says that he was already in the library, but he wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't until probably more than a year later that we actually started dating. By that time, the seminary had relocated over to Mill Valley, California, across the bay.
No, it wasn't but a year or so later, but I knew where he worked. I made sure that I was there, mostly in the library, I guess, where he was working, because I also had classes and things to take care of, so I
So-
put myself where he was.
So she was stalking me.
We actually met when we were still going to high school. And I have to remember this is back in '63, so I had a '51 Plymouth. And there was what we called a strip from Brewster's Dairy Queen on one end to the Tasty Freeze on the other end of town. And so a friend of mine, we were making the trip, and Doris and one of her friends was out walking around. At that time, you could walk downtown and everything around without having any problems. So we stopped and picked them up because my friend and I both knew both of them. And we rode around for a while up and down the strip from one side of town to the other. And then Doris wanted to drive.
Lean over and hold the wheel.
So I got her behind the wheel of the car, and it was a standard shift. She'd never driven before. We finally got it started. And my friend said something to me in the back seat. And I turned and looked, and the next thing I knew, she was screaming. I looked up, and she was headed right straight for a telephone pole. And she couldn't turn it, so I had to turn it for her. And that's really, I guess you might say, how we met.
The best that we can remember, first time that we really got in touch with each other was at a football game. And Janice was with another classmate, and she was wanting to get rid of him. And so she asked me to come over and sit with her for a little bit, and we sat there for a little bit and pulled a pea coat over our heads to get rid of the young man, and apparently it worked.
Well, I'll start out and I'll give my little spiel, and then Cherry can add to it. But basically, when I was about 14 years old, we moved from Porm to Muskogee, Oklahoma. And next door to where we lived was Cherry's cousin. And between the yards there, we had a little badminton, or not a badminton, but a croquet setup that my brother and I played all the time. Well, Cherry got to coming over and visiting with her cousin, and so then we got to playing croquet, and we played croquet. We was 14 or 15 years old by this time. And so anyhow, that was just, you know, a fun time. We got to know each other.
My one thing would be, when you start marriage, don't start out expecting to get your way about everything, because it's not going to happen. You got to learn to, well, okay, you give a little this time, and maybe next time he'll give a little, and I think that's the whole thing. And
Well, we just try to treat each other with respect, and
Well, mine was a little bit easier. I didn't have time to go nowhere but the house and back, and work and back. And
well,
so, but we went places
been in church, too.
with the kids. We got about 30-day vacation. We'd head to Florida, and that's when we decided, the two boys. We went to Florida quite a bit, and we went to Tennessee, Grand Ole Opry, you know. And then when the girls is born, well, we got a vacation from Corning, about a 30-day vacation, and we always went somewhere.
Well, of course, our parents were certainly what we looked at, and we were taught by them about marriage and family and life. And we looked to our parents, and we wanted to do. We were taught about being faithful and giving and loving, and we saw all of that. We grew up around that. He grew up around that. I grew up around that. So we had wonderful examples for that.
We were taught and told that when you got married, it was that you were stay together. You know, we were taught that very much so, and I can remember my folks telling me that explicitly before we got married. That this is a long time deal. It's not just not to be taken lightly, and we didn't take it lightly.
No, we haven't taken it lightly. It's been a very, very sincere thing. Yes, you have your little ups and downs, but like I said, at the end of the day, you forget about them. That's just loving one another and
We've only had one fight, and that started when we got married, and it's still going.
My best advice is, young people, if you're contemplating marriage, be sure that you're marrying the one that the Lord has selected for you. And that's what I did with Mary. I felt like the Lord put us together, and so you can't go wrong if you go with the Lord.
You kind of got to take it a day at a time. There's lots of good and there's a little bad, and you have to roll with the punch and accept both. And in our almost 60 years, we've had our share of both. Lord's blessed us.
I don't know that we've given any advice to anybody else, but at my bridal shower, all the ladies wrote bits of advice for me. And the funniest one was Terry's mother wrote, "Serve meals on time, and if he doesn't show up, throw it out." And there were bits of information from my grandmother and various other people. Some of them were sound advice, others were funny, and I've kept them all these years, go through them periodically.
I could tell the story about the bottles of beer,
No.
Didn't think that'd go over very well. But
Well, go ahead and tell it since you've already started.
No, we've had ups and downs, but more ups and downs, and I got my life really straightened out with the Lord up in a church in Tulsa, Fair Hill Baptist, and
I would say just don't worry about the little things, because they pass in a few minutes and everybody's happy. And just don't wear your feelings on your shoulder, and just pass up some things. And I just feel like that if you raise your family in a Christian home, that you will be blessed and they will be blessed, and we are certainly blessed.
I think that the secret to having your marriage be very happy is to, first of all, pray. The second of all is be friends. And the third thing is you have to give and take, and you treat each other the way I treat him, the way that I would like to be treated, and he treats me the way he would like to be treated.
It's been negotiated. It's just a regular marriage, you have every now and then you kind of get into it and have your little fusses and this and that, and then, but the main thing, and we was told by this lady one time, said, don't ever go to bed at night mad at each other. And I remember that,
Boy, that's hard to do though sometimes.
I would not change anything. Because you don't go to bed at night angry with one another. I know that's a scripture in the Bible, don't let the sun go down on your wrath, but it's also a fact that you can't do that. And, just accept the person as they are.
Well, think long and hard about it before you do it, and you gotta do a lot of pre-planning, and I think the best thing in the world you should do is go talk to a minister about counseling, because if faith is one thing, that if there's two denominations, you better get straight before, that you enter into a marriage, or if one is Christian and the other is not, creates a lot of problems. We've seen a lot of people go through that.
I think nowadays we live in a throwaway society. We don't get things fixed. And marriage is not a throwaway item. You've got to work very hard at that, because you've got two different personalities. And it's like my dad told me when we got married. He told me, he said, son, he says, this is a 24/7 job. But he said, you'll be blessed for it if you just like a job. You keep working at it and don't give up on it.
Well, I was at a beauty shop or something one day, and this girl heard me say something about our anniversary being so long, and she said, what is the secret to being married that long? I said, well, here's the 3 things I say. First of all, put Jesus in your marriage. Make sure he's right in the middle of all of it. Your life, your marriage, your children, always put God first. Second of all, laugh a lot, because we tend to let things build up and we don't laugh like we should. And third of all, cherish each other. Not just love each other, but truly cherish each other.
I tell you what, secret of our marriage is Cherry and I are not only man and wife, but we're good friends. We always have been. We've had the same interest. We've skied together. We've rode horses. We raised horses for 20 years. We rode horses. We've hunted together. We fished together. We've street rodded. She's got her own street rod. And we've been from Biloxi, Mississippi to Pueblo, Colorado, and all in between with our street rods. And what her interests are is mine, and what my interests are is hers. So I have really been fortunate. Now we'll turn it all over to Cherry, and she may dispute some of this stuff.
Well, the only thing I can add, I can remember we were at the Tulsa State Fair, and we got on a bus, and I don't know how the conversation came up, and how this couple behind us would even have known we'd been married a long time. And the guy leaned up and he said, tell me your secret to a long marriage. And I turned around and said, what? And he said, I can tell that you two are in love. You must have been married a long time. And this is what I told him, and I think everyone should know this. I said, in our home, as much as I love this guy, you put God first, and then Dick, and then our children. And I said, it must work, because we've been together, it'll be 55 years, June the 5th.